Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Whiskey Congress is back in session following a week off, and we are back in session on Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Steve and I are together in the Cleveland studio, so how's it going, man?
Good, man. Nice sunny day.
It's a beautiful day. Did you watch the Trump Town Hall?
I didn't watch it live, but I did watch a number of clips and snippets from it. And it's, look, we weren't going to learn anything new from that. I think, we know who Trump is. We know what he is. We know what his brand is. He wasn't offering anything new. I think he did say some things that were interesting that probably don't help him, with certain demographics. But at the same time, I don't think it changes anything for him. I think the people who were going to vote for him are going to vote for him. The people who weren't were not. The people on the fence, likely still on the fence, probably didn't get moved one way or another. It was a cherry-picked crowd that was live in attendance. I thought, the host, the interviewer, she did what she could with the situation. And I think CNN put themselves in a precarious position. I think that they were trying to promote the idea of neutrality and objectivity. But really, you gave a stage and a platform to a guy who has been known to lie and known to, manipulate, outright. So, the question is, well, how could they have done it? How should they have done it? At least have a truly neutral audience and not one that's completely, favorable to Trump. It's just like, all right, if you're going to do it and you're going to do it live, then at minimum there should be the potential for it to be uncomfortable for the person, no matter who it was, right?
Sure.
Whether it was Trump or Biden or whoever, that crowd should have been whoever wants to go, whether they're, pro-Trump or anti-Trump or whatever. I think that's a big part of where they lose credibility there. And, it's a lot of people are saying that CNN shouldn't have done this. They shouldn't have given the platform. And I would argue that I don't necessarily. I think that if you want, look, I don't have an issue with him necessarily having a platform. I just think that if you're going to do that, then you need the person who's going to be doing the interviewing needs to be able to go toe to toe with him to hold his feet to the fire, and the crowd needs to be objective, neutral, or at least there needs to be people in the crowd who aren't just there to be cheerleaders.
And there was none of that. Right. It was not a true town hall. It was a rally.
Right. It was a televised. Yeah. It was a CNN sponsored town rally.
Yeah.
For Trump.
Yeah. And well, first of all, let's be real. CNN did this because they wanted the ratings, and I'm sure they got them.
Yeah.
CNN and Fox have been, fight it out. CNN has been losing for years.
Yep.
And in the wake of Tucker Carlson being fired, I think they see some vulnerability, and they wanted their piece of the pie. So you got it. The criticisms of them giving him a platform, I hear them. But at the same time, he's Donald fucking Trump. He's a walking platform. Mm. So it's, but
and it's like, look, he says he does something, they're going to report on it. They have his entire presidency since he started running. So, it's just, whether they, give him 2 hours or whatever, I still think, like you said, he was going to get his message out. I think they had an opportunity to take control of that narrative a little bit. I said, get someone that, was willing to ask him hard questions. Now, I'm sure part of the negotiations were no hard questions and, it's got to be a favorable thing. And I think if you're CNN, you're just like, no, we're not doing that. And I don't know who would have been the right person to do the interview, right? That works for CNN that would have really been a good match for him, and not necessarily to argue with him in debate, but just ask the question, stay firm, know how to ask the appropriate follow-up question, and also try to keep him on track better than what I think. What was it, Caitlin Collins?
Yeah, something. I honestly don't know her from previous, but she did a good job.
And I think she may be sliding into that Don Lemon spot at night. I'm not sure, but either way, I just think they could have done it better. And they're getting a lot of criticism that they should get. I don't really watch CNN to begin with, so it's not like this is going to turn me off to them. I'm not a big CNN watcher. There are people who are, I'm done with CNN, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I guess, sure you are, maybe. I didn't, like I said, I didn't see it as that big of a deal, but I think some of the criticisms and critiques of CNN are worthwhile. And a lot of people are talking more about CNN than Trump. I'm like, yeah, but it's not like Trump said anything that really opened anybody's eyes. What is?
Well, he did say that the army was running out of ammunition.
Well, yeah, I shouldn't say that. He didn't bring a lot of value, right? I mean,
that
the whole
army
is running out of ammunition. I think he did a lot of praising of January 6th. And, it was a beautiful day and, praising and hailing. A handful
of people got out of hand, but other than that, it was all patriots. Pardon most of them.
Right. A lot of them. I mean, actually a lot he didn't, which for those, that you have to wonder where their head is at with that, thinking he was coming to save the day. Because even, even if it's just like, all right, well, if he gets back in the office, maybe he'll pardon me. But no one got a long enough sentence where, they should still be in jail for the most part by the time he gets into a position to, pardon them or whatever. So, that might have been all for naught if you thought that Trump was going to get you out of it. And then you do have the Proud Boys who were found guilty of sedition and a handful of other charges this week, which isn't on the board, but is worth mentioning.
Sure.
And I'm sure they'll appeal, but they have been found guilty, and they haven't been sentenced yet, but they are facing some, pretty serious sentences, and rightfully so. And you can sit there and try to make all the arguments you want, but I mean, I watched it live on January 6th, and I don't really, me, I don't take any bullshit on that. Whatever your stance is that they're just, Americans who were there protesting, I don't buy it. And, those guys orchestrated something pretty nasty, and they got something pretty nasty, and now they're dealing with a pretty nasty legal situation, so they can just fuck right off.
And by the way, Trump called the host a nasty woman. And then I found this interesting, and I haven't heard anyone else say this. When the debate ends, he's doing his, waving to the crowd. He actually turns to her and says, "You did a good job." And I don't want to give him credit for acknowledging that, but it seemed to me it shows that to him it was a game and a sparring match, and he was using her as a prop. But when he said that at the end, I thought, okay. At least he had the decency to say, I know what you were doing, and I think you did a good job at it. I wish he would have said it clearly to be heard over the mic. I think it was kind of the mic wasn't off yet, and everyone, the crowd was cheering or whatever. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I just look, when it comes to Trump, he didn't do anything really all that unexpected. He did, what's interesting though, he did talk about his relationship with the Second Amendment and gun rights, and his relationship with the NRA, which really sort of caused some issue in the Second Amendment community, because I've long said that, look, I am very staunch on the Second Amendment, and one of those people is just like, look, I'm not giving an inch. For multiple reasons, and I've long said that Trump is not a two-way guy. And when he came out and when he was talking about how he talked to the NRA about bump stocks and everything else, and that they agreed to, all right, give up the bump stocks, they're not that big of a deal. I've long stated that opened up the door for the ATF to take even more control that they really should not have, as they are not a part of Congress. They don't make laws, and yet here they are making these rules that turn people into felons. And that's extremely problematic. But yet Trump opened a door to allow the ATF to have more power and authority than they should have. And there are a lot of two-way people who have to reconcile their blind allegiance to Trump with the fact that he flat out told them that in a sense that he betrayed their trust and the Second Amendment with his actions, and it's definitely caused a rift, and that's interesting, and it's something that I'll watch, being embedded in that community to a degree, but like that was something that I found that was interesting that came out of that, which most people aren't picking up on, but when you pay close attention to things that impact guns and the Second Amendment, like things like that definitely are a red flag. And I that was a popcorn moment for me.
Two things that I was expecting you to say this. Maybe you saw this clip, maybe you didn't, but he referred to gun ownership as a privilege. Mm-hmm. And there's a big difference between a right and a privilege.
Yes.
Driving is a privilege. You earn it, you can lose it. Mm-hmm. According to the staunch Second Amendment crowd, it's a right that shall not be infringed.
Right.
Now, we don't need to debate about well-regulated militias and all, but the fact that he called it a privilege, let's just put it this way. If a Democrat called gun ownership a privilege,
they would lose their shit.
They would lose their fucking minds over it.
Right. And, yeah.
He also called the cop who shot Ashley Babbitt a thug.
Right. Yeah, and
okay.
that wasn't new. I mean, like there's a crowd that's pro-police until the police do something that they specifically don't like, and they have no issue criticizing the police. But the whole thing with calling gun ownership a privilege there again just shows that, like, look, this guy is not, he's not who you. I don't know who you think he is. I mean, he's been telling you who he is all along, and yet, you guys just choose to continue.
He gets to reinvent himself with no consequence. I mean, always. Right. He can say, "I never said that." We just showed video of you saying that. I never said it.
Right, and then the people jump in line and say that he didn't say it. I mean, the one thing I'll say is that my opinions of Trump have been consistent for the last 20 fucking years.
Mine are longer.
Right. I mean, I thought he was a joke when he tried to buy an NFL team and refused to open up his books. Like, how did you think that you were going to buy this multi-billion-dollar franchise without having to show your financials? Like what is your thought process there, right? And then going back to the debacle in Atlantic City and some of the failed real estate dealings, and then once I got into large scale real estate and being able to look at those deals from an actual professional standpoint, understanding what should and should not be there, and realizing how terrible these deals are, and some of the should be criminal liability to the banks that have lent to him in some of these different scenarios. It's amazing. So I've always thought the guy was a piece of shit. He continues to prove me right, and yet other people are just like, well, that doesn't count, and that doesn't count, and that doesn't count. He's just the best. You just don't understand. Whatever. It's madness.
Oh, it is, absolutely. And again, you saw this. Now he's saying this didn't happen, and if you're willing to turn your own blinders on, and just go, nope, I must not doubt the glorious leader.
And then on the flip side, it's like, well, our other option is Joe Biden, which, again, I also think that Joe Biden is terrible and, like, pleaded, the best that I could with my small platform for him not to be the nominee and not to be the guy that everybody got behind. Everyone's like, well, he's the only one who can win. It's like, because you're all saying that. Right? If everyone said that about someone else, that would be the person who could be the winner. So let's just pick someone else. And yet, no, we didn't. You go with Joe Biden, and the Biden administration has done a lot of good things. They've had some definite fuck ups and fumbles. I think that Biden's, a guy who has been in public office at a high level for as long as he has, especially in the age in which he started to come up, was definitely going to have some skeletons in the closet that were going to be problematic for re-election. And sure enough, here you are dealing with it. And I agree, Hunter Biden should be a non-issue, but yet he is, because this is 2023 and it's easy, and opposition research and social media, it's easier to get it out there and everything else. Like, even all that, right? Even with all that, like, I openly said I don't like Biden. I guess I have to take him over Trump. Right, as painful as that is, and it's frustrating. But my whole point in saying that is that a lot of people are going to say, "Well, I'll take Trump over Biden," right? And then it's just it's a hard argument for me to overcome, because I'm only voting for Biden just because I can't vote for Trump, right? Like I can't, and it's a hold your nose and do it, right? But then you're stuck with that. You have to own it. Like, all right, I did vote for this dipshit, and yet this is why I didn't want to do it. And so it makes it hard to combat when people are just like, well, you voted for Biden. It's like, fuck, I know that I did because I couldn't vote for this guy because he's an idiot. And it's just like, well, why'd you vote for that idiot? Because we have a stupid two-party system and I only had two choices. You know, it's a shit show of a situation.
And when people delve into third and fourth parties, it allows something like Trump getting elected in the first place. The Gary Johnsons and the Jill Steins of 2016 may have been the difference in that election. Yep. And in 2016, I was on record on this show as saying Gary Johnson was going to be my guy. And,
I know. And I begged you.
We got heated.
Yeah, I did because, again, just like looking at the landscape of what we were looking at, like this is not the time for this.
Right. I folded, by the way.
You did. You did. It just, it was a scary situation that we were looking at. And, you know, again, that's one where you hate to essentially be right. You know, like, fuck.
But I think a lot of people don't want Biden to run again based, if nothing else, on his age. And while that might be a form of discrimination, it's also a form of reality. Dude is going to be 78 years old.
Look.
Anyway, he's fucking old.
Like, if you want to make the age discrimination argument, it's just like, look, fine, but I wouldn't. There's nothing that I would hire him for. You know, I'm sorry. I own a company. There's nothing I would hire him for, right? Like, I don't want a 78-year-old guy. Like, maybe as a consultant, like, hey, you got all right. I would hire him as a consultant if he had a specific level of expertise in my field, right? If Joe Biden had a history of construction, some 78-year-old guy who knew construction in and out and was a master in concrete or a master of development, I would say, all right, I'll hire you as a consultant, but you're not doing the day-to-day. You're not running. You're not getting out. You're not going to be the face of the company. You're not going to get out there and talk. You're not going to be the guy traveling around doing all this other stuff. Like, just when I need you, I'll call you. You know, otherwise, just go sit on the beach and relax. Why the fuck would I take that guy, right, and say, I'm not going to hire you to run my company or work at my company other than in this limited role, but I'm going to give you control over the whole world. Like, make it make sense to me. Sorry.
All right, well.
It's just, in Trump, look, and my thing with Trump is he could be 15, 20 years younger and I'm not hiring him to do shit. You know, people say, oh, he's this great business. I'm like, I work in his business. I don't want to touch him. I don't care how much money he has. A lot of it is bullshit. A lot of it is built on fucking sand. And I wouldn't do business with him if no matter what. I'm just not doing it.
He's got a history of being a great scumbag.
I know people who have done business with him directly who he did not pay. Right, who he literally ruined their lives and crushed their careers, and they had to rebuild everything because they did business with Donald Trump. Right, so I can speak from a certain level of experience and just say I wouldn't do business with the guy. So if I wouldn't do business with him, if I don't trust him, if I wouldn't put any sort of like financial then why the fuck would I want him to run my country?
Right,
like come on, it's not anyway.
The thing about Biden that is just, I think we're seeing a psychology experiment play out, and that is when Biden was running in 2020, he essentially said, I'm a bridge to the next thing. I think he used that exact word. I know that I essentially quoted him as saying, I'm not going to run again, and he has backtracked on that, saying he never actually said that, and now he clearly is running again. He's announced it. I can't open a fucking YouTube clip related to politics without an ad from Joe Biden asking me for money. And while I don't have nearly as negative a view of him as you do, I don't want him to run again. I've said it here. I'll say it again. And,
he's gonna.
He's gonna. And
his only challenger is fucking crazy Robert F. Kennedy,
who's crazy.
Right.
What's the word I'm looking for? Oh, the one you just used. Yeah. All right. Let's just move on because there's more in the news stuff. Title 42 expired. I know what it relates to, but that's about it.
All right. So Title 42 stems out of a law that came into place in like 1944, and and we use it in 1944 essentially to keep Chinese people out because there was this outbreak of meningitis, and we really haven't used it much since then. but then we bring it back in 2020 under the Trump administration. Essentially, it's a law that says you can turn away immigrants because of fear of disease, and it's a public health, public safety rule. So Title 42 goes into effect, meaning at the border, it's easy to just say, you can't come because of COVID, right? Well, now COVID's no longer an emergency, right? Like that everyone now accepts, right? Like Republicans were saying it wasn't a big deal all along, but they were really big that we used Title 42, right? And there was a lot of hypocrisy with this, right?
Sure.
Because Republicans are saying COVID's not that big of a deal, but use that Title 42 to keep immigrants out or migrants or whatever.
Right.
And then Democrats are saying it's the biggest thing in the world, but we can't have Title 42 because we have to have all these immigrants, right? Or we can't be mean to immigrants or whatever the Democrat stand is on the whole issue at the border. So you have that whole hypocrisy-filled situation, but everyone now agrees that the COVID situation is now no longer an emergency, so they have to lift Title 42. It has been lifted, and there have been a number of migrants that have come at the border. Now, if you are in a silo of very conservative right-wing pundits and talking heads in social media, you will believe that there are, a million, South American and Central American migrants coming through the border every day. That's not the case, but there are a lot. Right, like there are thousands that are coming through on a daily basis. We don't have room to house them. We've got a number of facilities that, have a capacity of 1,000 people or 1,500 people that have 3,000 people in them. Rooms that have a max capacity of 20 that have like 150 people in them. It is a very dire situation down there right now. Because they no longer have like the legal authority just to turn people away flat out because of the COVID emergency and Title 42. Now they have to go through the process. They have to process them, right? And they don't have nearly enough judges, attorneys, social workers, really they don't have enough of anything to process them.
Border agents.
Anything, right? Like they don't have enough of anything to process the number of people that are coming through right now. It is frustrating because you knew that Title 42 was going to expire. You knew the exact date it was going to expire. So you had time for the last, I don't know how many months to prepare for this. And it looks like the Biden administration dropped the ball, and didn't. And they can say that, well, they did this, they did that, but it wasn't nearly enough. And this isn't Monday morning quarterbacking saying, well, let's look and see what there's like. Based off of the numbers of that they sent down, it's just like, look, we know that there's a good chance that you're going to, even if it was only 500 people a day, right? Like they didn't send enough reinforcements in the form of judges, lawyers, social workers, agents, anything down there to deal with what was coming. And so now you have a situation of overcrowding. You have a situation where, so the way it happens, like you come across the border, they interview you to figure out if you qualify for, actual asylum or whatever. But all that has to go through an actual judicial process, right? But since they don't have the ability to do it, like they give people a court date. Well, they're giving people court dates for 7 years from now, right? Like they interviewed someone, their court date was like 2031, right? Like, so then it's just like, all right, what do you do with them? And you process them, and right now it's just they're being released into the U.S., and then hopefully the person shows up in 7 years, right, to hear what their status is. And if they don't show up, it's like it's not like we go find them.
Right.
Like so the policy down there, it's bad, but the issue is not only do you have these like ridiculously extended court dates, right, where they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years away. But the fact that even in the immediate right now, you have no way to deal with them, house them. Everybody came down on Trump because, they were giving people the foil sleeping bag things that you like give people after marathons and
emergency blankets. Yep.
Yeah, and all that sort of stuff like that, and that was terrible. Kids in cages and like, well, look, we're dealing with the same situation. Nothing changed between Trump and Biden. Literally nothing changed. Maybe they cleaned up the facilities.
Separating families, I think, is the one.
Yeah, but still, it's still awful.
Trump bragged about separating families as a deterrent.
Okay, that's fine, but it's still the situation down there is still terrible.
Right.
Right? Okay, fine. The families are all together in a room that can hold 100 people, but it has 500 people in it, and they're all covered in their own shit.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying, a 6-year-old isn't getting told, you get to go over here away from your parents.
Fine. But you also, I mean, we had 2 kids that died, right, in the last week or in the last 10 days since all this has gone down, which just kids shouldn't be dying in U.S. custody. So, like, you've got some serious issues, and I don't understand. I really don't understand the impasse on why we're not really addressing this issue. Don't sit here, Democrats, and tell me all this stuff about humanitarian and human rights and caring about people, but you're doing absolutely nothing for this situation that you can see right now that you knew about, right? Everybody was all full of piss and vinegar when this shit was going on in 2016, 17, and 18, right? Well, now it's going on. And, like, Democrats, where are you? What are you doing? What are you doing about, like, where's AOC at the border, crying and everything else? Like, fucking get down there and let's figure out something to make this situation better than what it is right now. Right? This isn't about racism or xenophobia. Like, for some of the conservatives, yes, it absolutely is. But you have a real fucking issue down there with life and safety, right, of the border agents, of the people in the area that live there on the U.S. side, of the people that are coming over, kids that are coming over, all right? Whether the kids are sent there by adults irresponsibly, illegally, whatever, you still have this responsibility to other humans to not be fucking terrible. Right, so how can we make this situation better, right, and get the resources down there that we need to process these people? If we got to send them back, we got to send them back. I'm not saying open the border and let everybody come, right? I don't agree with that. I also don't agree with just sending people back just for the sake of sending people back. There has to be a process, and if people want to come but they're not asylum, then it's just like, all right, what is the pathway to get them citizenship legally? Right, so we're not sitting here attacking. And how do we expedite that? Right, like that. Those are the conversations that need to be happening, and those are the type of things that need to be coming out of Washington, instead of Greg Abbott shipping people all over the country. It's like, so now you're making it worse. Right, now we're taking these people, and you're saying, all right, I don't want them, so I'm going to send them across the country. Right, put them on a plane back across the border. Now you're taking the people, you're putting them on a plane, and then you're embedding them in the country. Right, and you win the snark war because you send it to a Democratic city, you send it to Chicago or Detroit or New York or whatever, Martha's Vineyard, but now they're just in the country, and now it makes it even harder to track them. And so, what have you done? How are you helping?
Well, they're not trying to help. The people that are doing that are trying to fuck things up. And they should be held accountable. I mean, DeSantis did that thing with Martha's Vineyard that you just kind of alluded to, where it's like, we're going to send dark people to Martha's Vineyard, and these rich white folks are going to freak out. And we were like,
well, I'm just going to take care of them because you're an asshole. Yeah, like,
exactly.
I mean, we'll do it.
And, I mean, that was a real shining a light on of DeSantis. Because
It did, right? But to my point is, it also shined a light on Democrats a little bit because everyone's like, oh, you can't do these to these poor people, right? Like, okay, you're right. He shouldn't have done that, and that was totally wrong and disgusting, everything else. Can we address why he was able to do it, though? Because you had all these people that came over the border, and then they overflooded, and then they got sent from Texas to Florida, and then he said, like, can we do something about the border so that he doesn't have the opportunity to do this?
Well, I mean, in this particular case, he's facing legal trouble potentially, because of how the transportation was funded.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'm
broader point. Like, again, but the issue is at the border and our policies with immigration.
What?
That's the thing that needs to get resolved. Focusing on DeSantis and Abbott and all the ism and the racism and all that other shit, that's not getting you in. You have an actual problem that we can solve for. Can we please solve for that? Worrying about how DeSantis did this publicity stunt I don't really care if he ever gets.
I hear you. What you're saying from a logical perspective, something I can't argue with, won't try to argue with. But I will say that we both know the reality. None of these assholes want to solve the problem, and that goes across the board.
I don't understand why. It doesn't make sense that no one wants to solve it, because if you solve it, you're a fucking hero. Right? Because if you solve it the right way, right, like you have to balance humanitarian with national security, right? So if you can, if you solve it where you've stemmed the flow of illegal immigration, you create a process of an efficient and humanitarian process for asylum seekers, people just looking to come over legally, and then ways to filter out the people who just shouldn't be here at all. Like, it's a hard task. It is it's not an easy fix. It's not going to happen overnight, but you're a fucking hero if you do it. So I don't understand why nobody wants to do it.
Well, so I think the elephant in the room is the cartels, which you can blame on the cartels or on our country's desire to use the products provided by cartels, but they're essentially a foreign military that is causing such havoc in that part of the world. So I'm going to say, part of that solution has to be the drug war. Whether it's ending the drug war, whether it's fucking rolling Abrams tanks into Tijuana. I don't personally endorse that. Obviously, without...
You need to go to Tijuana. Let's leave Tijuana be. It's a special place for some of us.
Well, you know what's funny? You say that, though, because Tijuana used to be a playground for Americans, and now it still kind of is. I know people who've been there fairly recently.
Different type of playground.
Well, yeah, it's become... My uncle's lived in Southern California for 35, 40 years. And he would tell me that when his kids were young, that was like one of their favorite weekend, getaways. He said, now I wouldn't go there on a bet. And my uncle's very conservative, and he gets his information from Fox News. So maybe Tijuana isn't the hellscape that he believes it is. But when I was working down there, I knew a lot of folks who were like, yeah, 20 years ago, Tijuana was a playground, and you could still find trouble, and there was still plenty of...
I mean, it's been 15 years since I've been, and it was not the best place for me to be then, and I did not get out without an altercation. So, it's I don't know if it's gotten any... Maybe it's gotten a lot better.
I doubt that
it has.
I think it's gotten substantially worse.
Like, in our altercation, it was actually really bad. Like, we were very fortunate we made it out the way we did. But... I don't know if Tijuana's... We're getting off track with Tijuana.
Until we find out what the statute of limitations is. Let's...
Right, but I guess to the broader point is, like, you have to address these issues. Now, if you want to tell me that corporations are what is driving... Because the thing with the cartels, like, yes, that's a part of it, right? They're driving human trafficking, there's drug trafficking and everything else. And that has to be worked into the solution. The problem is how high up is the influence of... is the cartel influence in, like, the Mexican government. But you also have the issue with that a lot of these people aren't from Mexico. Most of these people aren't. They're from Venezuela. They're from Cuba. They're from Nicaragua. They're from El Salvador. They're from these different places. So it's not necessarily Mexico, right? Like, you have to deal with the cartels. Well, that's the thing. You have to deal with the cartels in Mexico, but the people are coming from somewhere else, right? Like, so then what's going on in those countries is something that you have to deal with, and that's Blinken, right?
Right.
That's you know what I mean? Like, so you have to deal with that. Like, he needs to be addressing and dealing with that, like, figuring out why are these people leaving and what can we do to get them to not leave and migrate across, quarter across a continent or whatever.
Right.
So again, I said, it's not easy. It's multifaceted. There's a lot of layers to it, but someone needs to be attacking it and addressing it in real time. Now, the other point I was going to make is if you want to tell me that corporations have a big say in why you don't want to solve this because of cheap labor and everything else. Okay, I'll listen to that, but I'm not saying, like, so because corporations want to continue with cheap migrant labor that we should just ignore it and continue to deal with this.
There used to be in World War II, there was something called the migrant worker program, where literally during harvest seasons and times of excessive demand of labor, where it's World War II, so most of the male labor force, or a huge fraction of it, was fighting a war and wasn't available to do labor back home. They would literally have a program to get people in. Now, this was, I believe, mostly a U.S.-Mexico thing. It might have extended to more of Central America. I don't know. But literally, it was a program where we're going to help you get into the country safely and legally. And when we don't need you anymore, we're going to help you get out safely and legally. But we're going to be bringing you back when we need you. And that way you can make money in the U.S. and go back to your home in Mexico where you want to be in the first place. Because a lot of these folks would love to stay in Mexico. They just can't make money and feed their families there. Yeah. So that would be...
And there's some of that does happen. There are
some of it does. You know what I mean? I don't know what the legality of it is, but I do know that crossing the border has gone from being relatively easy to much harder in the last several years. And that's not, dating back to Reagan probably, maybe before that. And so now if I'm a Mexican or a Venezuelan trying to make money in America, I know that once I get across that border and get safely into work, I'm much better off than when I have to actually make the crossing. And if I knew I could cross back and forth without the risk of being apprehended, dealing with the fucked up situations you're talking about, I would be much more willing to come and much more willing to leave.
Yeah, that's that's all part of it.
That's a part, right? There's no one answer.
Right, like there's just, it's not, but no one's actively working towards it, and that's the part that kind of irks me a little bit, by a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just like, I don't like the stance from either party on this, right? Because the Democrats don't seem to have a message on it, other than their whole thing is that
you're racist,
right? That the conservatives are racist because they want something done. I think if Abbott wasn't such a fucking clown, I could listen to what he, same with DeSantis. Like, if they weren't so ridiculous about how they're going about it, like, look, it is an issue. There does need to be addressed, and it's the U.S. border. It needs to be handled at the top. But, the theatrics with, and just the just inhumane treatment of people by saying, all right, now you've already done this, so now we're going to put you on a plane. We're going to put you even more thousands of miles away and put you in the middle, whether you know anybody or not. Good luck. And then just saying, "Ha, we got you, Blue City." Like, it's just okay, right? Like,
there's plenty of blame to go around, and if anyone is putting out solutions, I'm unaware of them.
Right, like things that would actually work, that actually make sense, right? Like,
right.
If you're going to sit there and argue, oh, well, Trump wanted to build a wall, like, okay,
by the way, he claimed he did it.
Yeah, right. Like, it's just like that sort of thing. Like, this isn't about an actual physical wall, right? Because if you're worried about the drug cartels, they don't get, a wall doesn't do anything to stop them, right?
I think it's proven that almost all of their product makes it in through ports of entry.
Right. Like, I mean, like, most of it's going through ports of entry. You do got some that comes across the border. A lot of that stuff gets caught, and they don't even bat an eye because, again, they're flying it. They're literally flying it in,
dropping it.
It's coming in on boats. They've got submarines.
We wouldn't have Cocaine Bear if it wasn't for
exactly.
a chance to bring up Cocaine Bear.
The wall isn't stopping that. And, look, an actual physical barrier in some instances makes sense, but you're not going to have a wall that runs purely all the way across, like the Great Wall of China. Like, just the terrain says no.
Right.
Like, and we already have physical barriers in some spaces, and in other places, you're fucking up the environment. You're fucking up people's actual property that they own. There's plenty of reasons why that doesn't work, but there are other things that could work if we had people that were actually working on those actual real world solutions, but they're not.
I want to talk about members of Congress actually working to solve a problem, but first I got to bring up George Santos. So George Santos
hold on.
is.
I want to do this.
The
Marine
right,
in New York. So you had a homeless guy, Jordan Neely, who ends up being killed essentially by a retired or
former Marine.
Marine. That's always hard because you're always a Marine. But the situation was Jordan Neely was homeless. He had some mental health issues, and he was a street performer, but he had definitely some issues with aggressive behavior and dangerous and violent behavior. He's on a train, threatening people, arguing with people, and multiple people on the train go to restrain him. The Marine, who I can't think of his name right now, comes up behind him, puts him in a chokehold, holds him in a chokehold for about 15 minutes until they can get the person to calm down. And then ultimately Jordan Neely ends up dying after being restrained for 15 minutes in a chokehold. So they ended up charging the Marine. Do you have his name?
Daniel Penny.
Yeah, Daniel Penny, the Marine. So he ends up getting charged with second-degree manslaughter, which in New York I think it's since up to 15 years. And second-degree manslaughter in New York is that you didn't intend to kill the person, but the person accidentally died doing something that could have possibly brought along that person's death. So in this particular instance, you've got a Marine holding a guy from behind in a chokehold, which there is the potential for death. It wasn't the Marine's intent, but that's what happened. Now, I believe that the Marine has a good defense here, in that like, again, his intent wasn't to kill the guy. And after he releases from the hold, they tried multiple things to, resuscitate him. They're unable to do so, and Jordan Neely dies. Like, so, again, I don't believe that he has the intent. I think he can show that this was an accident. We'll see how that all plays out. I personally wouldn't have charged him if I'm the prosecutor. I just believe that the Marine has a good defense. I understand the situation. It's very unfortunate what happened. But it's the reality of the situation. The guy was being very aggressive on the train. We have video of it, right? Like, it's not just the Marine holding him. There's two other people there trying to get something out of the guy's hand. Now, I would argue, like, look, if you're choking me from behind, I'm going to fight like hell as well to have you not do that to me.
Sure.
People saying, oh, well, he should have stopped. It's like, look, none of these people were police. And if you're choking me, like, I'm going to fight until the very end because I whatever. And the guy was clearly having a break from reality, right? Like, he was having a mental issue. So, I mean, it's complicated, right? And so, like, if it's me, if I'm the prosecutor, I'm not charging Penny. I can understand why they decided to charge him, but I also think that Penny has a good enough defense where he will make it out of this, but I don't know.
Well, so I know you almost certainly know who Bernard Gaetz is.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't, because you're not old like me, Bernard Gaetz was a New York City subway rider back in the early 80s who sharpened a screwdriver and was basically in a spot where a bunch of punks tried to rob him. He was prepared for it, and he fatally stabbed at least one of these guys with a screwdriver that had been sharpened into a weapon. Very polarizing thing because, you got this guy who's like, 4 kids attacked me. I defended myself. I had a screwdriver. It's legal for me to have a screwdriver. If you're in that circumstance and you got someone wigging out on the New York subway, which happens all the fucking time, but it's a tense, awkward situation. Once you feel the need to go in, you're kind of in until law enforcement arrives.
And the issue is too, like, again, Jordan Neely is being aggressive towards people on the train, and again, they're on the train, so it's not exactly easy for them to escape.
No.
And distances between stops on trains aren't exactly short. Like, I mean, it could
that happened to me in Boston once. So some crazy fucking psycho with green teeth yelling at me to say,
it could be 10 minutes between stops, and 10 minutes is a long time for a person that's wigging out. And so, this idea that look, I understand that people are upset that Jordan Neely was killed. I understand that people are upset that he had some mental issues, that he couldn't get the help that he needed. Or refused the help that he needed, or couldn't see, or whatever, had stopped taking his medication. He had a hard life. He also had a very extensive rap sheet, but none of that matters in the moment, right? Like, he was doing what he was doing. People felt the need to defend themselves. And it's an unfortunate situation. Now, you can make the argument like, oh, well, people wig out on trains all the time, and that's fine.
No, it's not.
I mean, people do wig out on trains all the time, but we're not, we can't be arguing that if someone is making people believe that their lives are in danger, that we should just kind of let that go, and then, oh my God, he actually killed somebody, or he punched that lady in the face, or whatever. Like, I can't get behind that. Like, this is an unfortunate situation the way it turned out, and the reality is if he doesn't die, right, then
Penny's a hero.
Penny's a hero, right? Oh, well, he died, right? And it's interesting because he had him in a chokehold for 15 minutes, and the guy fought for nearly 15 minutes. So I'm curious to see what happened, right? Like, so Neely clearly hadn't, like, and if you've ever sunk a chokehold before, like, and not everybody has, but you do have a certain level of control of how tight that thing gets. Sure. And you're essentially, you've got your free hand that braces up against the hand that has, the neck in a vice. And that is how you can control and apply pressure, right? Between squeezing the bicep and pulling that wrist up. And it's like when you're in that position, right? You do exert a lot of energy, but the person fighting against you exerts a hell of a lot more, right? And you have the control over basically how much air they get. So it seems like the guy was able to have a good balance of this for an extended period of time until the end. So then the question becomes, like, what happened? Did the fighting get so intense as Neely started to kind of like black out or whatever that, Penny ends up applying more pressure than he should have, and then the guy, passes out and dies or whatever? Were there drugs in his system? I don't know. But what I do know is that the guy was posing enough of a threat where not just Penny, but two other people, which one of the guys was either black or Puerto Rican, that was trying to get the, thing that was perceived as a weapon out of his hand, right? And were fighting with him the entire time. I just, it's a tragedy that it happened, but when we're dealing with people that are posing a threat to other people in public, we got to be able to deal with that without it being racist because the guy was black. And here's the thing: if Jordan Neely was white, right? The question is, some of these people that are so upset about this, would they be, right? Or is it, well, because it's a black man, then I'm just I don't care about the facts, I don't care about logic or reasoning or whatever. A white guy killed a black guy, and so it's racist, right? And if that's where we're going, we're gonna have a problem.
Well,
have a problem.
I want to say one thing. This is not a replay of George Floyd. Right?
No.
George Floyd, you got 4 cops who've got a guy completely immobilized. They chose to stay on his neck unnecessarily until he died. Right. Once you get engaged in this fight, you got someone freaking out. What you just said actually just shows, I don't want this to sound like a douchey thing to say, but what a shitty chokehold Penny had on this guy. Because for it to last 15 minutes, I mean, I've done jiu-jitsu. You've been choked in fights before. I know at least one story. When you get a rear naked choke done right, you got about 10 seconds until you're unconscious.
It wasn't. I wouldn't say shitty. It was the right point.
Maybe that's the right point. You're trying not to choke him unconscious.
Trying not to kill him. He's trying not to. It's just dude, you need to calm down, right? So here's a way where let me occupy you in a way that keeps you from hurting other people. And so you can have a good hold on someone and essentially immobilize them without necessarily choking him off. But then the problem again becomes as they struggle more, right? And they maybe they slide down, right? And you're trying to, or they change their physical body position, that can impact how you have a hold on it. And am I defending the Marine in this particular instance? Yeah, I am. And it's probably not a popular take amongst progressives or liberals or what have you, but I'm sorry if you ever been on a train and had someone that you don't know how stable they are, and they start screaming and yelling, you're like, okay, but then they start getting in someone's face or your face. Then once all the red flags and bells and whistles and alarms go off in yourself, right? This person is posing a threat to me. Then you got to be able to react. People have to be able to protect themselves, and if they can't protect themselves and someone else steps in and does it for them, then this idea that we're going to hold these people and treat them like pariahs just doesn't track with me.
I'm gonna jump on your bandwagon to a degree and say, put yourself in Penny's, the Marine's position. If Jordan Neely goes off and waylays a 90-year-old lady, and it comes out, there was an ex-Marine on the train with this happening, and he chose to do nothing.
Right.
Then he's a bad guy for that.
Right.
It's really enough.
If he hits somebody, if Neely hits somebody, or if he stabs someone or whatever, right? And people act after the fact. Well, now you've got, you've got a really mess.
There's no happy solution to this.
No, there's not. Right. I mean, it speaks to we got to do something about mental health. We got to do something about homelessness. But then it's safety on trains and everything else. And I can't condemn this guy, Penny, for what he did. I don't believe that he intended to kill the kid. I recognize that Jordan Neely needed help, but at the same time, he needed help. But he was putting people in a position where they were not safe.
Right.
They felt that they were not safe to the point where multiple people felt the need to physically step in and restrain this guy.
Right.
Right. It wasn't just Penny. Penny just wasn't on his own. There were 2 other people that were trying to restrain this guy and get him to calm down. Right. And so you can sit there and talk about it being racist and all that other stuff because the guy was white or whatever, but at least one of the other people trying to restrain him was not. Right, and the people on the train didn't have an issue with them trying to restrain the guy, right? Like, so I get that the guy was like a performer and maybe he was beloved by the people who he had not been aggressive with, and it is unfortunate.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, his lack thereof of mental health and help, he wasn't able to rein his shit in, and it ended up getting him killed, and that is sad. But like, I'm not going to fault the people who were trying to protect other people from this guy. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
All right. Now can I trash George Santos?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I'm not going to trash him. I'm just yeah. I'm sorry. George Santos has been charged with a multitude of financial crimes related to his campaign, and I think some other issues. He's facing potentially 20 years. George Santos is an easy guy not to like, in case you don't know who we're talking about. You obviously don't listen to us enough. But he's a New York congressman who basically got into office on a series of lies. And it's something that 20 years ago, this guy would have been laughed out of office and bounced. But we live in a post-truth world. But
I mean, look, they charged him with fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, false statements. They said he allegedly embezzled contributions from supporters, fraudulently obtained unemployment benefits, and lied in disclosures to the House of Representatives. I mean, look.
Yeah, that's quite a list.
Now, he's saying that it's a witch hunt and that they're after him because I don't know. But
he's saying it's a witch hunt because that's become the
number
one defense.
He's literally just mimicking Trump.
Yep.
You know, I mean, he's taking a page out of DeSantis's Trump book and just like, well, I'm just going to say what Trump says, and then that should probably get me out of this because I'll get everybody who likes Trump to get behind me because they'll think that they're. But the problem is that this guy doesn't have the team that Trump or DeSantis have. To cover up his bullshit, and so like he left a lot of loose ends that are probably going to take him down. And look, these charges are not a joke; these are federal charges, and so if found guilty, George or Georgina or whatever his name is, he going to jail for probably. You know,
he's facing up to 20 years.
Right.
So.
He's probably looking at double-digit years. He may not get the full 20, but I have to imagine he could be looking at 10. I mean, and look, in the paper trail, it's not like this isn't just, I'm reading these lines. Like, there's been multiple reports of reporters who have been able to put it all together. People who have gone on the record and said, like, this is how he took money from me that I contributed to his campaign. And it was not legal, appropriate, whatever, authorized, so on and so forth. So, I mean, he made plenty of political enemies along the way in the Republican Party. So, I mean, I don't think things are looking too good for George Santos. I think his house of cards of lies and BS are going to be coming down around him. He's going to scream witch hunt the entire time. It'll be interesting to see the level of support he gets from the Republican Party. I know Kevin McCarthy initially said that, well, I'm not going to do anything about him because he hasn't been charged. And now it's, well, everybody's proven until, you know, or everybody's guilty or innocent until proven guilty. So we'll kind of see, we'll see how much support he gets from the Republican Party. I have to imagine that Republicans are probably going to start to just kind of be real quiet about George Santos and not say anything about him one way or the other, not take questions on it. They'll probably put something out like, hey, you can ask us about George, or don't ask us about George Santos. No one's saying anything, right?
Blah,
like,
blah, blah.
Yeah, and so he'll eventually not exist to them. He'll be on his own. He'll get found. He likely ends up being found guilty, and he goes to jail. And then he's kind of a laughingstock, like he already is. That's about the best case scenario I see for him. And we'll see, but we'll see how it goes down.
It's tough to feel bad for the guy because he is such a dishonest.
There's nothing to feel bad about. Like, I mean, dude's a liar and a cheat, and some of the stories about him that aren't necessarily criminal, but are just messed up. With some of the stuff with I don't know what he had going on down in Brazil, but I mean, it's a whole weird story about him being a cross-dresser performer and taking money and wedding proposals and leaving people at the altar and It's bizarre, right? Like it's sort of thing that you're just like, this is a really bad movie that was poorly written, but it's real life that would probably make an okay movie about this guy.
I mean, so much of our politics has become, I can't believe we're talking about this, but here we go.
Yeah.
So I want to say something good about Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz and AOC co-sponsored a bill to make it illegal for members of Congress to own individual stocks, which is frankly, A, a long time. This should not be the case to begin with. B, they'll find a way around it within 20 minutes once this law gets passed. But you still got to do something. And what I really want to give Matt Gaetz credit for is when Fox was attacking both AOC and Matt Gaetz came to AOC's defense and saying the way they're sexualizing her is inappropriate and unprofessional. I agree. The snicker is understood, but he did the right thing in this case. He said, "Look, they made up some on the I think it was the morning show on Fox, where they were spinning this Matt Gaetz and AOC are going to be in a sitcom together where they hate each other but they fall in love and get married and blah blah blah." And Matt Gaetz is like, "Look, you're being stupid." To Fox, and I give him credit for that. I also give both of them credit for putting this bill out there, because this is the kind of bill I love, in the sense that you put a bill out there where it's saying there's corruption in our government. We all know it. Many of the people in this room participate in it. Do you have the balls to vote against this? And voting against your own ability to be corrupt and be covered is, I think, legally risky. Not legally risky, but is professionally risky. Because if you're a senator or congressman from Georgia and you vote against this, and I'm running against you, that's the first thing I'm campaigning with.
Okay, well, and this is why you don't run campaigns. This doesn't matter. It's a nice gesture. I don't even know if this bill ever sees a vote, but if it does, it's dead in the Senate. And I agree, everything you're saying is right. But it's smart on both accounts to put it together, put it out there. But I mean, look, none of these guys are going to vote for it. It's not a risk, because no one will even remember, right? When all these people run, like their opponents aren't going to say, "Well, he had a chance to vote for," and even if they do, no one's going to care. I know it should matter. And it should impact people, and it should back people into a corner. But every single one of those congressmen and senators who own stocks and illegally insider trade, they're all going to vote against it, and they all will go to AOC and say, "Oh, real cute attempt, little kids, but no one gives a fuck," and go away. And that's what's going to happen. I think I applaud them. I hope that this passes through the House, through the Senate, becomes law, and Nancy Pelosi and all of them have to give up all their stocks. Not just put it into a blind trust or put it into whatever, but like it's not going to get there. Now, I would love to be proven wrong, but I think that your view that this is going to be some sort of a thing that if people don't vote for it, there's not a single person that this will hurt their reelection chances. I
hope you're proven wrong as well.
I do too, but it's not.
You know what? Even if you're going to go out and say this is nothing but a hollow gesture with no,
I think they both believe this, and they both said it, and I think they truly believe, like, look, this is something that needs to be law. I'm not saying they're doing it just for song and dance. I think they want this to pass, and I think they will both lose sleep over the fact that they'll probably never see the House floor or see a Senate vote. But just the reality is, it ain't. So, sorry to burst AOC your bubble, Matt Gaetz your bubble, and Jim your bubble, but it's not going to. Now, again, prove me wrong, fantastic. I'll eat crow all day. But I mean, it doesn't get passed, and I don't think this hurts a single person's chances at re-election. And I would love to watch every commercial when election season comes up to see exactly who uses this against who.
Again,
you know what I mean?
And let me be clear. What I said was, I'm aware that it was very pie in the sky. But I at least like seeing something out there that says, we know this is a problem. You could not get two people who are more different in terms of their voting record.
Yep.
So
I agree. I like everything about it except for the reality that you know what I mean.
When John McCain and was it McCain-Feingold? John McCain years ago did something to try to curb corruption, and he was on Imus's show at the time, and they're now both dead, so there's that. But and Imus said basically, great, you put something into place that they will find a loophole around in 5 minutes. And John McCain's response was, does that mean I'm not supposed to try?
Yeah.
You brought up blind trusts. As soon as, if this law were to go into effect, the reason they will vote for it is because they'll find a loophole around it in 20 minutes and they'll still get to do their shit. And now they'll say, I'm not corrupt. Look, there's a law that says I can't do this. So everything was in a blind trust managed by my hedge funder, who happens to be my kid.
Yeah, I mean, I again,
hedge funder.
Like, they need to try.
Yeah.
I want them to try. I want it to be successful. Right, and even if someone can find a loophole around it, at least that's better. And then at least
close the loophole.
Right, then you're like, all right, like, well, how do we close this loophole? Right, like, I mean, like, there are solutions. I just don't have faith in their counterparts in Congress and Senate that they will have the support they need to get this across the finish line. Again, hope they do, but they don't, and they won't. So
all right, we're going to go way too long if we're not careful, and there's one story for sure I want to talk about. The head basketball coach of my alma mater, Mr. Robert Huggins.
Bobby.
So let me tell you this from my perspective. I heard Bob Huggins is in trouble. I saw headlines on ESPN, should Bob Huggins get fired? So I started looking into it, and I misdiagnosed what had happened. I read that he was on a Cincinnati talk show and said something inappropriate. I read deeper, and he did that. And when I initially read it, the way I thought I interpreted it was, he said something back when he was the coach of the University of Cincinnati 15 years ago, whatever it's been, 20 years ago. Nope, he did it like last week. And what he did was he called the fans of Xavier, he started to call them fags, and then he changed gears and called them Catholic fags as if that made it better. So he literally double clutches. He's about to say something he knows he shouldn't, stops, and thinks, if I just add the word Catholic, that will make it better. He's subsequently been suspended for 3 games. I don't want to see every time someone says something stupid or offensive that they're immediately banished for life. So I'm glad the university addressed it. I'm glad Bob Huggins didn't get fired. But if it's so dumb. The reason to fire him, in my opinion, is because you're supposed to represent a role model, if for no one else, the young men you represent as a coach. And you went out and did something that if they had done, you would have sat them on the bench and said, what the fuck's wrong with you, at the very least. So I'm just so dumb.
I mean,
oh my God, it's dumb.
I feel, similarly, like, again, I just, the idea of running around firing everyone every time someone says something that is offensive that people don't like is ridiculous. But at the same time, I think that he should be held accountable to a higher standard because he's a coach of young men. And I think the punishment is appropriate because, he's missing 3 games. That's a lot of money. He also had to reduce his salary by $1 million each year in his contract. So I think that is substantial.
That is.
And he makes millions. I'm like, look, bitch. Like, I don't care if you make $5 million. You chop one of those millions off. That is a lot of fucking money to lose. And so that's a hell of a price to pay for not being able to, watch your fucking tongue. It's 2023. It shouldn't be that hard to not say fag. I mean, it's not a term that I use. I just, have never been fag. Like,
right. But it's when you were in high school, it doesn't make it okay.
I know it was huge in the 90s for people. I always this actually got me into an actual fight with a kid. He called a kid a fag. And I just looked at him. I was like, you do realize you look like what the way you say that makes you look like the thing that you're calling him. I wasn't quite as nice as I said. I'm saying it a little nicer now than I did then. Kid gets real pissed at me. We get into a very brief altercation that he regrets probably still to this day because of what I did to his shoulder. But nonetheless, it's just a term that I don't use. And so it always kind of hits my ear sideways when I hear it. People even in conversation will kind of throw it out. And I'm like, yeah, and it's just like, oh, sorry. Like, yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. You sound like an idiot. But again, lose his job, should never coach again. No, I don't think so. But being suspended 3 games, basketball season,
$1 million.
Right. The basketball season's not that long because he loses the money from those 3 games, which his per game, I'm sure, is probably pretty high. It's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars per game.
I have no idea
that
how
he
much he makes, but he's well paid.
Right. Because he's got a contract, and so it's I'm sure it's a few $1 million. So, you break it up over the course of, however many basketball games that they have, and I'm sure it's substantial. But either way, I think, being suspended for the 3 games, losing the $1 million, having to publicly apologize, which, Bob Huggins is not public apology guy. So, I think it's appropriate. And I think that, having realistic, reasonable punishments for things like this makes sense. It's also West Virginia.
Easy.
I'm just saying, it's not a place where they're going to get too upset about what he said.
It's not NYU.
Right, exactly. So it's a little bit different situation. It's not even UMass where I went, right? Like, head coach at UMass says something like this, like he would be gone, right? It's just a way more progressive university than a West Virginia. So, place matters, and so that I think it works out for him. It's dumb, but it's dumb because of Bob Huggins. Because, there's no one else did anything wrong, right? Other than the people on the show, because if even with you and I and our interaction on this show, there have been times where you've been about to say something, not offensive like this, but
you too, my friend.
Fair, but at least with you, I can see yours coming a little bit and try to jump in and stop you and intervene, right? So when Bob Huggins stops before he says Catholic, then you just jump in and say, hey, Bob, buddy, hey, why don't we go a different direction here, right?
In radio they have what's called a dump button.
Yes.
Now, you usually don't want to dump your guests. And here's the thing. If you drop it, if you say fuck on the radio, that can get you into trouble with the FCC.
Yeah.
Fag does not get you into trouble. Now,
I think it was on a podcast though. So
was it? Okay.
Yeah. I think it was on a podcast.
I don't think so. I think it was a radio show.
Right. Well, they probably could have just dumped him.
For his own good.
Right. Exactly.
You
just dump him and just say, hey, coach, we just saved you from yourself there, and let's keep moving.
Yeah.
Right?
That's probably on the other hand. If you're that radio show in Cincinnati, you're like, ooh, this is gold.
Maybe, but
it's a shitty thing to do.
Or, I guess I'm more of a guy of I'd rather curry favor with the guy. Like, all right, listen, I just saved you from yourself. So I'm gonna need you to come back on the show without any bitching, Bobby.
One of our things has always been we don't edit anything. We'll occasionally insert sound bites or whatever. We don't change anyone's words. We had a guest once when you were out of town who said something that was utterly cringeworthy. And I was asked by the person that connected us with this guy to cut that out. And I said, nope. He said what he said. And, I'm not vilifying the guy for it, but it showed a little bit about his, as much as anything, the circles he rolled. Should I just come out and say it?
Yeah.
So we had a guest on the show.
He said it on the show.
He said it on the show, yeah. He was talking about his co-author. And he said, my co-author's an African-American. He's smart, though. Mm-hmm. And I just went, okay, you just told me you hang around in country clubs and places like that where you have to immediately respond to someone's black, but they can actually still be smart. And it was just cringeworthy as fuck. Now, this guy's in his 70s. And I just thought, okay, that's kind of a reveal of where your head is, and I'm not cutting out that sentence to save you from yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, and
honestly, I expected to call once that episode aired. I literally spent the next day going, "When's the call coming from Steve?" Going, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, in that sort of situation, it's just you can bitch about it, but at the same time, he said it, he put it out there, and that's on him, right?
Exactly. And I put so the conversation I was dreading is, possibly from you or from anyone, is like, why didn't you confront him on that? I'm like, I'm not going to confront my guest and say, here's what you just did, and try to browbeat them.
Yeah,
it's a tough spot to be in, especially with someone I don't know.
Right, like you're in a tough spot there. I probably would have pushed back on him at that point, but does he say that if I'm here? I don't know, right? And so it's
well, he wasn't physically here either.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like if I'm in the right there in the moment, like, do I call him out on it? I don't know, but at the same time, that is something that I probably would have said. Well, why don't we
see?
No,
I don't. When I was wrestling with this in my head, I kind of felt like a pussy because I didn't push back and say, yeah, you don't need to do that. But at the same time, I don't know the guy. It could devolve the conversation.
It could, but at the same, I think there should be some accountability. Like I think we're going to bring people on the show. Just because you're our guest doesn't mean that and that goes back to what I was saying about Donald Trump earlier, right? Saying things that aren't accurate, that aren't true, or whatever, or that are just shitty. You should hold people to account, right? Like, but that is someone who's getting paid on CNN as alleging to be a journalist or whatever. You're not being paid or on CNN or alleging to be a journalist. But I personally, in that situation, probably would have said, "What the fuck does that mean? What's your point there?" You probably would have said, "I was just kidding." Like, well, it's a shitty joke.
No, I don't think he was kidding.
I understand that, but again, I can't do anything about it because it didn't happen live. But I could just say that's kind of how I think the conversation might have gone, should have gone. But I'm not going to hold, I'm not going to sit there and throw something at you and say you betrayed me or whatever. But for me, it's more on that person, and now we've gone way off and over and everything else.
And the point was that I didn't take it out, so I didn't save him from himself because his words should be something he's accountable for. And that brings us back to Bob Huggins. Okay, let's wrap this up. We are at Whiskey Congress on Instagram and Twitter. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. We're done.